The United States did not begin as a global power, it began as a fragile experiment, doubted by empires and uncertain of its own survival. For much of its early history, America avoided world affairs, fearing that global entanglements could destroy the republic from within. Yet within 2 centuries, this former colony would shape global trade, warfare, culture, and politics on an unprecedented scale. At the moment of its independence, the United States was weak, deeply divided, and economically dependent. The victory over Britain in 1783 secured sovereignty, but not status. European powers viewed the new nation as temporary, vulnerable to collapse or reconquest. America had no standing army worth mentioning, no navy capable of defending its trade, and no unified national identity. Survival, not dominance, was the immediate concern. The nation's early leaders understood this reality. George Washington warned against permanent alliances, urging neutrality in global conflicts. The young republic focused inward, on stabilizing its government, paying off war debts, and settling its vast but contested lands. Power, at this stage, meant control over territory and the ability to govern it effectively. Expansion became the first foundation of American power. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 doubled the nation's size overnight, securing access to the Mississippi River and opening enormous economic potential. It was not just a land deal, it was a strategic transformation. The United States gained resources, agricultural wealth, and geographic depth, key ingredients for long-term influence. As settlers moved west, the country's economy began to diversify. Agriculture fueled exports, while early manufacturing took hold in the Northeast. Canals, railroads, and ports connected inland production to global markets. By the mid-19th century, the United States was no longer a peripheral economy. It was becoming a continental power with growing international reach. Yet expansion came at a cost. Indigenous nations were displaced, enslaved labor underpinned economic growth, and political tensions deepened. These contradictions culminated in the Civil War, a conflict that nearly destroyed the nation. But paradoxically, the war became a turning point in America's rise. The Civil War forced the federal government to centralize power, modernize its economy, and mobilize on a massive scale. Industry expanded rapidly to meet wartime demand. Rail networks grew. Financial systems matured. When the war ended, the United States emerged more unified, more industrialized, and far more capable of projecting power than before. In the decades that followed, America entered an age of explosive industrial growth. Steel, oil, electricity, and mass production transformed the economy. Cities expanded, immigration surged, and American goods flooded global markets. By the late 19th century, the United States had surpassed many European nations in industrial output. Economic power soon demanded political and military presence. While the country still resisted the idea of empire, its actions increasingly contradicted that stance. The Spanish-American War in 1898 marked a decisive shift. In a matter of months, the United States defeated a declining European empire and acquired overseas territories, including Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. This moment signaled America's arrival on the world stage. For the first time, the nation held territory beyond its continent. Naval bases extended its reach. Trade routes expanded. The United States began to see itself not just as a nation among many, but as a power with global interests to protect. Still, America remained cautious. When World War I erupted in 1914, the United States stayed neutral for years. The decision to enter the war in 1917 was driven by economic ties, security concerns, and direct threats. The American intervention proved decisive, tipping the balance in favor of the Allies. Yet after the war, the United States retreated once again. It rejected the League of Nations and turned inward during the 1920s and 1930s. Despite its economic strength, America hesitated to assume global leadership. That hesitation ended abruptly in 1941. The attack on Pearl Harbor thrust the United States into World War II and transformed its role permanently. Mobilization on an unprecedented scale turned the country into what was called the arsenal of democracy. Factories ran day and night. Scientific innovation accelerated. Military power expanded across oceans. By 1945, the United States emerged from the war fundamentally changed. Unlike Europe and Asia, its homeland was untouched by destruction. Its economy dominated global production. Its military spanned the globe. And for the first time, it possessed nuclear weapons. The post-war world demanded leadership, and the United States accepted it. Through the Marshall Plan, America rebuilt war-torn Europe, stabilizing economies and securing political alliances. New institutions, the United Nations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, reflected American influence and priorities. But power invited rivalry. The Cold War reshaped global politics, positioning the United States against the Soviet Union in a struggle that extended far beyond military confrontation. Influence was measured through ideology, economics, technology, and culture. Proxy wars, diplomatic pressure, and strategic alliances defined the era. American power was not only military, it was cultural. Hollywood, music, consumer brands, and media carried American values worldwide. English became the language of global business. The dollar became the backbone of international finance. Power, increasingly, meant shaping how the world thought, traded, and communicated. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 left the United States as the world's sole superpower. Its military reach was unmatched. Its economy drove globalization. Its political decisions carried global consequences. Yet this moment of dominance also brought new challenges. Global power proved difficult to manage. Conflicts in the Middle East, economic crises, and rising competitors tested American influence. Technology reshaped warfare and diplomacy. The balance of power became more complex, less predictable. What remained constant was this: the rise of the United States was not inevitable. It was the result of choices, some strategic, some accidental, some deeply flawed. Geography, resources, innovation, and conflict all played a role. So did contradictions between ideals and actions. The story of how the United States became a global power is not one of simple triumph. It is a story of adaptation, ambition, and consequence. A nation repeatedly pulled onto the world stage, reshaped by the power it sought and the responsibilities it could not avoid. And the story is not over. As the 21st century unfolded, the nature of global power continued to evolve, and with it, the role of the United States. Military strength remained a central pillar, but it was no longer sufficient on its own. Economic stability, technological innovation, diplomatic credibility, and cultural influence increasingly determined a nation's standing in the world. The United States entered this new era with immense advantages. Its universities and research institutions drove breakthroughs in science and technology. Silicon Valley reshaped global communication, commerce, and information. American companies became central to the digital infrastructure of daily life across continents. Power was no longer measured only in ships and soldiers, but in data, networks, and innovation. Yet globalization also exposed vulnerabilities. Financial crises revealed how interconnected and fragile the world economy had become. Decisions made in Washington could trigger consequences far beyond American borders. At the same time, manufacturing shifted overseas, and economic inequality at home raised questions about the sustainability of global leadership. Diplomatically, the United States faced a more multipolar world. Rising powers challenged American influence, not always through direct confrontation, but through economic leverage, regional alliances, and strategic investments. The old Cold War framework no longer applied. Competition became quieter, more complex, and often less visible. Military engagements in Afghanistan and Iraq demonstrated both the reach and the limits of American power. While the United States could remove governments and project force across the globe, shaping long-term political outcomes proved far more difficult. These conflicts sparked global debate about intervention, sovereignty, and the cost of leadership. At the same time, America's global image became more contested. To some, it remained a symbol of opportunity, innovation, and democratic ideals. To others, it represented dominance, inequality, or instability. Soft power, once assumed, now required active maintenance. Domestically, debates over foreign policy reflected a broader question: what should global leadership look like in a changing world? Some argued for renewed engagement and alliance building. Others called for restraint and a focus on internal challenges. These debates were not signs of decline, but of a nation reassessing its role. What distinguishes the United States from previous global powers is not just the scale of its influence, but the openness of its internal struggle over how that power should be used. Its global role has always been shaped by tension between idealism and pragmatism, leadership and restraint, unity and division. The rise of the United States as a global power was never a straight path. It was marked by hesitation, conflict, and reinvention. Each era forced the nation to adapt to new realities, often under pressure, often imperfectly. Today, the United States remains deeply embedded in global affairs, not as an uncontested ruler, but as a central actor in a complex system. Its influence continues to shape markets, security, culture, and ideas. But the form that power takes is still evolving. History suggests that global power is not permanent. It must be renewed, justified, and balanced against responsibility. The American experience shows that influence grows not only from strength, but from the ability to learn, to adapt, and to confront contradictions honestly. How the United States uses its power in the years ahead will determine not only its own future, but the direction of the world it helped shape. In the end, the United States became a global power not through a single moment of conquest or declaration, but through a long series of turning points that gradually expanded its reach and reshaped its identity. Geography provided opportunity, but it was human decision, political, economic, and moral, that determined how that opportunity was used. America's rise was driven as much by circumstance as by intention. Wars it hoped to avoid, markets it did not fully control, and technologies it could not ignore repeatedly pushed the nation outward. Each time, the United States emerged more connected to the world, more influential, and more accountable for the consequences of its actions. What sets this story apart is its unfinished nature. Global power is not a permanent condition, nor is it a guarantee of stability or moral clarity. The American experience reveals that leadership brings both influence and burden, both authority and scrutiny. Power invites expectation from allies, rivals, and citizens alike. The United States today stands not at the end of its story, but at another crossroads. Its past shows that strength alone has never been enough. Adaptability, legitimacy, and a willingness to confront internal contradictions have always shaped its role on the world stage. How the United States became a global power explains where it has been. How it chooses to act now will define what that power ultimately means.